We have another potent week full of planetary transits. In this week's astrology, the Hunter's Moon in Aries will take place, allowing us to consider ways to be more self-motivated. Venus is shifting into Sagittarius, which could lead to more adventurous romantic scenarios. Jupiter and Chiron are making retrograde phase transits that mark turning points in our lives. There is another Yod pattern forming this week, causing us to evaluate unintentional arrogance. And Venus will make the most transits this week, emphasizing our need to work on relationships and money issues. And speaking of Venus, romantic vibes will be present throughout the entire week. So this is going to put an extra emphasis on love, relationships, anything to do with flirtation, but it's also connecting with good luck, social, and ambitious tenors until the 15th, allowing us to feel encouraged to take care of our objectives. Also, up until about the 18th, these amorous tones, the romantic vibes, they're going to intersect emotional sensitivity and mental vibes all the way up until the 18th. Because this is a mixed bag of transits this week, it might be a time where we're feeling touchier than typical. Sure, we've got some sweet spots, but with some of these energies, we might find ourselves overthinking a bit, and we may find ourselves reacting and possibly saying the wrong thing. It's kind of one of those weeks where there might be some foot and mouth situations going on. Then from the 18th to 20th, ambitious vibes return, and it's going to blend with those romantic vibes, psychic tones, social energy, along with family and friends. Over the weekend, we might feel overactive. We may feel also very receptive to vibes. We may also feel the need to connect deeper, whether it be on a social level, platonic level, family and friends. And of course, because those romantic vibes are there, yes, there's definitely some romantic energy in the air. And so there might be a need to connect when it comes down to our love lives as well. So yeah, definitely another one of those weeks. Let's look at these next bunch of days and see what we can expect. Don't forget to like and subscribe because it helps this channel grow. Also, if you're looking for a natal chart reading or intuitive coaching, the links will be in the description box below. And if you'd like to support the work of this channel, you could do so by buying me a fresh cup of coffee. The link will be in the description box below as well. Monday opens up with a plethora of alignments, and some of the first ones that we're going to be experiencing is going to be Chiron and Jupiter. The sun's going to make an opposition with Chiron, and the sun is going to also make a trine with Jupiter. And these alignments deal with the retrograde cycles of these outer planets. Sure, Jupiter is direct, it's in its stationing phase, but it's also going to start receiving some alignments that mark the end of its retrograde. But we'll get back to that one in a bit. It's the Chiron situation that we have right now where it's still very much in its regressive motion. Chiron is at its halfway point. That means we're 50% complete with its retrograde cycle. This is kind of like a full moon energy. And so it can feel like a really strong turning point. It could be a time where we're looking at what's working in our lives regarding healing ourselves, regarding our coping skills, regarding other patterns that we need to break to prevent self-sabotage, looking at what's working for us, what's no longer working for us, and looking at some of the things that we're incorporating in our lives to experience personal growth and to see if it's working or if it might need some sort of tweak. Because this is combined with the sun's energy, it may be a time where we need to focus on what's working in terms of standing out for who we are, managing ego issues or anything to do with identity, anything that sets us apart from the crowd, exploring ways to boost our confidence, and just take a step back and recognize our exceptional skills that we have and why we're worthy to shine. It could also be a time to understand what might be creating disappointment in our lives, what we need to do to develop a healthy ego, and how to get out of circumstances where we feel underappreciated. So energy like this can be very potent and can feel very intense. Our moods may fluctuate on this day. I mean, considering the variety of transits that we have, our moods are going to fluctuate throughout this week because it's a mixed bag sort of week. And with energy like this and this being the peak of that Chiron retrograde cycle, we can definitely feel that intensity and definitely feel like we're at a turning point of sorts. And to add to the intensity of that day, also on that same day, before that exact Jupiter transit with the sun, we're going to get a connection with Mars that may feel intense. So we have a Sun square Mars situation going on, and although this energy can have its fun spots and have its daring spots in the sense where we're looking for fun, we're looking for adventure, we're looking for romance, because this could also rev those things up. And one other good thing is it may mitigate some of the disappointment and gloom that comes from that Chiron situation. But the way the Sun Mars situation occurs is it really revs up our confidence confidence to a level of arrogance that may be problematic. So it could result in impulsivity, other reckless behavior, carelessness, unjustified confidence, taking on an argumentative tone, like a more confrontational tone towards others due to the levels of arrogance that this spews out. So it's something to be aware of in this. And it may be a day where we're also seeking validation and ego boost and going about it the wrong way, leading to misunderstandings and possibly some flare-ups. At least we do have the Jupiter situation, which again may offer a little bit of mitigation from some of these circumstances from the Chiron situation, and even the Mars situation, which is a mixed bag alignment. But this Jupiter transit marks the end of the retrograde motion. Sure, Jupiter went direct 4 days ago, but generally we get this trine on either side of the retrogrades. We get it at the opening of a retrograde 4 days after Jupiter goes retrograde, and then we get it once more when Jupiter stations. And that generally happens again within that 4-day range after the station. But energy like this can help us feel like we're hitting a good part of the turning point with the Jupiter retrograde, where we're feeling more optimistic about some of our decisions, where we're headed, and we're having some clarity about the path that we're on. So this could really encourage us to take a more positive perspective and realize it's time to release unconstructive ideals in our lives that are holding us back. This can feel very freeing. This can feel like we're at a point where we're seeing some of our limits being released from us, and that there's some light at the end of the tunnel. Also, this is great for boosting confidence. So again, it may mitigate some of the gloominess of that Chiron situation. Although again, I still feel like this may be a day of fluctuating, considering some of the alignments with Mars included. And we also have something going on with Venus and Uranus on that same day too. But even if things feel stressful and difficult, we may end up turning our attitudes around and feeling like we've got some possibilities around the corner, and find ourselves looking forward to the future where we do have options and opportunities ahead. So circling back to this Venus-Uranus situation, on Monday, we still have more energies that might bring in a disruptive tone, considering Venus and Uranus are going to be in an opposition with one another. This alignment can be difficult, and it can create disruptive behavior concerning our relationships, whether that be platonic, whether that be romantic. Energy like this can create erratic situations. I mean, more or less, if the situations were already limiting, if the situations were already unconstructive, there could be a need to break free. There could be a need to shake things up. There could be a need to make sudden changes to those situations, which may not go the way we want. This can also translate when it comes down to finances and career, especially if we've been in a job situation that felt like it was going nowhere and very stagnant. This might be a time where we're wanting to make some shifts to that. Also, because we are dealing with Venus, this may be a time where we want to revamp our style as well. And again, with energy like this, since it has adverse effects, it's just not the time to make these changes. I know that sometimes you have to make a decision and you have to take action, and this is happening closer to the full moon, so there is going to be a keyed up need to take some action. But if you can, go slow and make sure you're making the proper decisions, or you have a proper exit strategy and game plan for any of these scenarios to avoid any sort of adverse effects or anything else backfiring in your life. At least 24 hours later, on the 15th, Venus is making a harmonious configuration to Neptune, and that may soften things just a bit. This trine that Venus is making with Neptune can put a need in the air to just have some spiritual connection. This is definitely a week, despite some of the harder transits, to really just need connection. Even if we were seeing that emotional sensitivity there and that mental energy, just a need to be more social throughout this week, regardless of some of these hard transits. And so this can create the urge for a deeper connection with someone. And also, this could be a deeper connection when it comes down to our platonic relationships, obviously our romantic relationships. But there might just be a need to have a soul connection with someone, and someone who's in alignment with you. Another fun thing about this energy is we'll have the urge to enjoy mystical things. So it could be a time to really just dive deep into tarot or other esoteric knowledge and any other form of metaphysics. It's also going to be a good time to just enjoy good music, movies, writing, poetry, and anything that helps us get into a flow state and just enjoy the creative parts of life. Once we get to the 17th, 15th, we've got more Venusian activity, and this happens to be Venus going into the sign of the Archer. That being said, as we lead to take things seriously and be cautious methodology of Venus and Scorpio, we transition into a more carefree and risk-taking approach. So these last 3 weeks, we've had this Venus and Scorpio, which forces us to examine uncomfortable aspects of love and money. But now that we're moving into Venus and Sagittarius, it'll help us let our hair down a bit in these situations. And sure, this Venus and Sagittarius is going to hit some squares with Saturn and Jupiter, along with Neptune, and a few other uncomfortable alignments for good measure. At least this energy in itself is cheerful and daring and fun-loving and brings on a vibration that's more upbeat than typical. So even with some of the harder alignments, this may soften up some of the rough edges. And one of the reasons for this is Venus in Sagittarius is great for allowing us to see the possibilities in life and be more hopeful and seize the day when it comes down to our relationships, our love lives, and career. So we might take a more upbeat perspective when it comes down to these things and not dwell so much on the harder things, with some confidence thrown in for good measure. So it marks a period to expand our horizons, get the most out of life, and have some fun while we're at it. When it comes to romance in this energy, it may be a time where we're looking at all of our possibilities. So for those who are single, this might be a time where you're opening up your options. This might be a time where you're looking at diversifying your choices because maybe you felt constrained in your love life, just picking one type of person, or even limiting yourself to just one person if you're single and putting all your eggs in one basket. This could be a time where you're finally opening yourself up and treating the world like it's your buffet. Of course, this doesn't have to be out of hand, and if you're not that type of person, this does not mean that that's what you're going to do, but it may actually help you in terms of opening up your perspective and looking at the big picture of your love life. For those in committed relationships, this could be a time to really get adventurous and try new activities, make travel plans, visit restaurants, do cultural things, and connect on a deep intellectual level with one another. On a social level, with our platonic relationships, this really does put us in the mood to be interactive. So it could be a time to be in a celebratory mood where we're throwing parties and just having get-togethers with people and just making sure we're mingling more with people, and we're also getting stimulation from our interactions. And by stimulation, we're engaging in conversation that stimulates our mind, that might be on the philosophical level, that might be on a higher minded level, and things of that nature. It's also a time to enjoy lighthearted banter, and by lighthearted banter, things that are comedic. It's a time to really be jovial and just engage in the most amusing conversations. Because Venus has to do with our finances and how we earn our money, this might be a period where we're considering expansion in our lives. And by that, maybe we're wanting to look at our options when it comes down to our career. Maybe we're wanting to go for that promotion, even if we're not necessarily feeling ready. This might be a time where we take that chance. Sagittarius energy is about shooting your shot. It's about aiming your arrow at multiple targets and hoping one of those targets hit, and having the hope and belief that it'll all work out in the end. And so we may take that sort of positive outlook when it comes down to our profession and anything to do with our finances, causing us to take some chances that we typically wouldn't take. Speaking of money, Venus is also how we splurge, and it's also how we adorn ourselves. So this could be a time when we find ourselves spending on Sagittarius things. So it might be a period of spending money on courses. It might be a period of putting money to the side for travel, splurging on spiritual things. And in terms of adornment, we could be splurging on something that's boho chic, clothes that are much more bolder in color or statement, and sometimes things that are just less restrictive when it comes down to what we like to wear. But with the lower vibration of this energy, we do need to be aware of how we spend. This is an energy that's not afraid to take risk, and so we just need to make sure we're not going overboard when it comes down to our spending. This is also a type of energy where we can be more indulgent than typical, and so that can be with our spending when it comes to adornment, other things that we might be purchasing, and even down to food, drinks, and alcohol, because it brings on a celebratory tone to it. And so we may feel like it's time to just like treat ourselves, it's time to just celebrate, and find ourselves splurging more than we typically do. So it's something to just try to keep in balance within this energy. Even though this helps us take a different perspective when it comes down to our love life, we also need to be aware of the need for freedom in this energy. Obviously, nothing wrong with wanting freedom when it comes down to your relationships, but energy like this isn't the most committal. So for those seeking something that's more committal and deep, this may be a time where you're feeling a little bit of frustration because it does enunciate the non-committal types and they're more present than typical. Socially, we need to be aware of overbooking ourselves. This type of energy has the fear of missing out, and so there can be a massive problem with overdoing it, overscheduling, overbooking, and then burning ourselves out or making people feel as though they're being penciled in or like they're on a checklist and we just need to check them off. And of course with this is, try to rein in the need to jump at every opportunity. It's good to have options, it's good to have variety, but sometimes it is definitely a throwing spaghetti at the wall kind of energy, which does work sometimes, but then there are times where it doesn't, and so you want to make sure you're not finding yourself in a situation where you're people hopping or job hopping or anything that might cause instability. Just as Venus is entering Sagittarius, it's going to make a connection with Pluto that can really help us in terms of creating meaningful connections. It's kind of what I was saying earlier, where this is a week where despite all of the harder transits, we are going to be in the mood to socialize and connect and that sort of thing. And so with this Venus-Pluto situation, it gives us the urge to have those experiences, whether it be from our love life relationships, our platonic relationships. It's a time for seeking out connection. Of course, it gets more intense in the romantic sector of this. So those types of scenarios are going to definitely rev up intensity and passion. But either way, we'll be fixated on mingling this week. And I say either way because on that same day, we do have an aspect that can be social, but it does run into some snags. Mercury is going to make a Sesquiquadrate with Jupiter, and interactions may lead to foot and mouth scenarios. The urge for engagement will be stronger than it typically is with some of these alignments that we have on, and this Mercury-Jupiter situation is no different. So it could be a time where we have this huge need to share ideas with other people and to get as much mental stimulation from our connections as we possibly can. However, with an alignment of this nature, it tends to lead to encounters with people who over-exaggerate, people who boast a lot. So it might feel like a day where we're dealing with people who tell tall tales or people who are just arrogant and need to pat themselves on the back and brag about their situations. It could also manifest as dealing with people who are righteous in the way they speak, very preachy, very opinionated. And so of course that can be annoying. And then due to the fleeting nature of this energy, we need to be aware that we're not overlooking critical elements. In other words, if we have any important documents, paperwork, signups, subscriptions, and things of that nature, we need to be thorough in reading everything because we might be skimming the details and missing crucial matters. That fine print sometimes really gets you, so you just want to make sure you're doing all of that very slowly to ensure you're not signing up for something that you really don't want. Especially because we have a yod as we get to Saturday. On the 19th, we have the Sun, Uranus, and Neptune forming a yod, and that's going to rev up things where we have some snags and mishaps. Mostly because this is dealing with the Sun, a lot of this is going to have to do with our ego, issues with our personality, our sense of self. The Sun's going to get a ton of pressure from both these planets in a sextile. Uranus and Neptune happen to be in a sextile with one another, and they're forming that apex point onto the Sun. And so even though we've got some social vibes for the weekend and some fun things, this is going to key up some other things in the background and lead to mood fluctuations. Some of the ways this might manifest is a need to boost our confidence and feeling extra pressure in that, but the way we go about it might backfire. On the flip side, this can point out where we're self-conscious, disillusioned, eccentric, or gaining our sense of self through shock, and by that gaining our confidence or who we are through doing behaviors that throw people off because it gives us a rise, it gives us a nice ego boost to get a reaction out of others, and that kind of behavior. Energy like this can also show us where we might be undermining our sense of self by fading in the background to make other people comfortable, or it can point out an unconstructive need to be a contrarian for the sake of differentiating ourselves from others. So all of these energies can feel very intense as we're getting into the weekend despite having that urge to be social. So yeah, we've got another week that's emphasizing turning point and transformative energy. So do the best you can when all of this hits and use some of these harder transits to get really ambitious and back in the driver's seat of your life. Anyway, I hope you all have the best week ever. Later, and see you in the next episode.